Hey there, in this video we are going to talk about multiplying fractions. So to start, I want to point out that when we multiply fractions, we do not have to have a common denominator like we do with adding or subtracting fractions. When we multiply fractions, we simply multiply across the top and across the bottom, and that becomes our new fraction. We do always want to simplify that fraction if at all possible. So let's take a look at our first example. We are going to multiply the following fractions. So notice the denominators are not the same, and that's okay. They can be or they can't. It's up to the problem, and it really doesn't matter either way. So we multiply across the top. 3 times 1 is 3. And we multiply across the bottom. 4 times 2 is 8. So 3/8 would be your answer on this one. Now, sometimes we can actually simplify fractions or factors on top and bottom of the fractions when we are multiplying. Now, this only works the way that we're going to do it when we are multiplying fractions, so be careful of that. And if the numerator of the first fraction, which is the 3 right here, and the denominator of the second fraction share a common divisor or vice versa. So, or if 4 here and 5 here shared a common divisor, meaning a common factor, a number that can be divided into both of those evenly, then those factors can be simplified to create smaller numbers to work with, which might make it easier to multiply. So I'm going to show you two methods here. I'll show you the method that we just used, where we don't worry about simplifying before we multiply, and then we will also talk about how we could simplify before we multiply in this problem. That might make it a little easier to work with, especially since you won't have a calculator. So across the top, 3 times 5, that's going to be 15. And then across the bottom, 4 times 6 is going to be 24. Now, when you do that, we want to check to see if we can simplify 15 and 24. If you go through the factors, for example, of 24, 1, obviously both of these can be divided by 1. 2 does go into 24, but it doesn't go into 15. 3 goes into both of these. If you keep going, we can see if any other ones do. 4 is a factor of 24, but not of 15. 5 is a factor of 15, but not of 24. So I'm going to take it off that list. 6 is a factor of 24, but not of 15. And then we've got 7 doesn't work for either. 8 is a factor of 24, but not 15. 9 is not a factor of either. 10 is not a factor of either. 11 doesn't work. 12 doesn't work. For 15, it only works for 24. And then we have 13 doesn't work, 14 doesn't work. And then once we get to 15, we know that nothing over 15 is going to work, even if it worked for 24. So with that being said, the only number higher than 1 that worked was 3. Now, I wrote all that out. Typically, you're going to be thinking that through your head as opposed to necessarily having to write it out. So looking at those factors, we can go ahead and divide by 3 on top and on bottom. 15 divided by 3 comes out to be 5. 24 divided by 3 comes out to be 8. So that's going to be 5 over 8, 5/8. So that is one method. Now I want to compare that to our other option, which is simplifying the fractions first. Now, 3/4 itself cannot be simplified, and 5/6 itself cannot be simplified. But when we are multiplying, like I mentioned earlier, if our top left and bottom right numbers, or in other words, numerator in the first one, denominator in the second one, or bottom left and top right, so look diagonally essentially, if any of those numbers on that diagonal here can be simplified, we can go ahead and simplify those ahead of time. 4 and 5 are not divisible by anything but 1 in terms of having a common whole number factor. 3 and 6, though, are. So 6 is really 3 times 2. So what that means is I can actually cancel out or simplify the 3 over the 3 on top and bottom. 3 over 3 is 1, so this is really like a 1 right here. So this is the same as 1/4 times 5 over 2, because the 3 here and the 3 here can cancel out, and we are left with this set of multiplication. And when we do that, we can multiply across the top. 1 times 5 gives us 5. And across the bottom, 4 times 2 gives us 8. Then we didn't have to do any simplifying like we did over here. So we can see, looking at all of our work and comparing, we can see that 15 over 24, we had to know our factors, for example, of 15 and 24 and the common factor between those, as opposed to knowing the common factor between 3 and 6. That's a little simpler. So if you can recognize that you can simplify before you multiply here, then that can help you in terms of the length of time it might take you to solve a problem. So in summary, with multiplying fractions, we multiply across the top and we multiply across the bottom, and that is our new fraction. We do want to simplify if at all possible. So divide by the same number on top and bottom if at all possible. And then additionally, remember that we can simplify first if you notice the factors that can cancel on the top and the bottom. And if you do that, that can often take out the need for having to simplify in the end after you multiply.